All right, joining us now to talk about Boise State Broncos. No one can do it better either. He's from the Idaho Press and Blue Turf Sports. It's the Boise State Bronco beat writer, BJ Rains, joins us back here on the Full Court Press. BJ, welcome back, and exciting Saturday coming up.
Oh, really looking forward to it, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
BJ, let's start here. Introduce us to Boise State, 1-2 on the season, but I don't think that 1-2, as Coach Anderson has mentioned it several times in his press conference, really tells you how good Boise State is.
Well, I mean, that's what the players are saying this week. They've said multiple times, and the coaches too, we're 6 points away from being 3-0. And it sounds like that's kind of what their rallying cry is this week in terms of their motivation and their confidence level. They were up 21 points on the road at Central Florida and let that one slip away and lost by 5. They feel like they were the better team and should have won that game. And they didn't score in the second half and lost by 1 point against Oklahoma State, a Big 12 team. They felt like they were the better team and should have won the game. So they feel like they're, very close from being 3-0. And they're not. They're 1-2, and they certainly have some serious issues on both sides of the ball. But, they feel like they're a good team. The record may not show it. And they're pretty eager for a fresh start here for conference play to try to turn things around.
You watch the running game, both on offense and defense, and one, they're not producing much on the offensive side, and two, they're giving up too much on the defensive side. What's the bigger concern for you, the offense running game or the defense is just their weakness in giving up so many yards? Jalen Warren over 200 yards, former Aggie, now turned Oklahoma State. Just what's the bigger concern for you?
Yeah, that was the most rushing yards that Boise State's given up to opponents since 2009.
Oh, wow.
When Ryan Matthews had 235 against him for Fresno State. So it's a big concern. I put a poll on Twitter, and I think like 75% of the fans, over 1,000 votes, said the offensive side. But for me right now, it's the defensive side, because their pass defense has proven to be pretty good and shown. But when you can't stop the run, you can't do much of anything. I mean, the other team can just eat the clock, which limits your possessions on offense, and that's hurt them in both of their 2 losses. And so I would say right now that they're both concerns, but because Hank Bachmeier has played pretty well, because they can still move the ball some through the air, I would say defensively that's a much bigger issue. I mean, Andy Avalos, when he was a defensive coordinator at Boise State 2016 to 2018, they were routinely top 20 in the country in stopping the run. And so they thought they had a good defensive line, thought they had a good linebacking core, and to come in and have 2 teams already rush for 240-plus yards against them, I think that's pretty surprising, including an Oklahoma State team who was not very good at running the ball coming into the game. So you got to stop the run. It all starts there, and I think that's a big focus for them this week. But, Utah State's rushed for over 200 yards a game themselves, and so it's going to be a big challenge, no doubt.
Hey, talk to me about Hank Bachmeier. There is no running game right now, but the passing game seems to be going all right. Well, what do you see out of Hank? What do you like out of him and his receiving core?
I mean, I think he's played pretty well. He's made 2 crucial mistakes. He threw a bad interception when they were driving to try to beat UCF, and with like 3 minutes left. And then he had a bad, ill-advised throw, which was an interception midway through the fourth quarter in the loss to Oklahoma State. And you got to give the guy, some credit, because he's trying to make a play. They're not running the ball. No one else is doing anything. He's trying to, make a play and win the game for his team. And he just forced a couple passes, and they were intercepted. Other than that, he's played really, really well. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's averaging 280 passing yards a game, has 5 touchdowns, and only those 2 picks. And so, after the game, there were some fans calling for Jack Sears, the backup quarterback. But, Hank Bachmeier is not the problem right now. It's the fact they can't run the football. So I think that he's played really well. I think this is an RPO offense that he said he's never run before. There's been a lot of changes, a lot of things he's getting used to and learning for the first time. He's having some growing pains, but I think he's played very well and has had the first best 3 games of his career probably in terms of just what he's put together. There's 2 losses, but again, I don't put those on him very much at all. He's trying to make a play. 2 bad decisions, and unfortunately have to live with it. But I think he's played pretty well, and like I said, he's the least of their problems right now.
BJ, this Boise State team is 1 bad call and maybe 1 bad play away from being 3-0, but here they are coming into this matchup at 1-2. What's the level of frustration among coaches and players about some things that have gone kind of out of their control a little bit to where they're at a 1-2 start, or is that being a distraction for them with the controversy of some of the calls that happened last week, or they feel like they've kind of put that behind them and they're moving on?
Well, ironically enough, it was Mike Gundy who was calling the refs crooked and making comments about the officiating the other day when his team actually benefited from one of the most egregious calls of the season. To be honest with you. So I thought that was kind of funny that, but he's actually been way more outspoken. Boise State's coaches basically said it is what it is. You saw the play, but, they're not using that as an excuse and they're moving on. But I mean, anyone that watched the game clearly saw the ball came out, clearly saw it was a fumble, clearly saw Boise State's, safety, halfway down the field, 20 yards from the end zone when the referee decides to blow it dead and say he was down. There was no need to blow it dead at that point. He's already passed everybody. There was no safety thing, and he was in the clear by himself. And that would have been a scoop and score touchdown. And the facts are, it should have put Boise State up by 6 points with 3 minutes left in the game, and Oklahoma State hadn't scored all second half. So I mean, you hate to be that point up official mistakes and say that was why they lost the game. But I mean, that was a clear one where it was obvious on replay, and they gave Boise State the ball. They just didn't give them the touchdown, and then obviously that they were had to move the ball, and that's when the field goal was missed there or blocked with 2 minutes left. And maybe if they're the outcome would have been different or could have been different. Who knows? Maybe Oklahoma State comes down and scores, but it was an egregious call and it was a bad whistle. And but Boise State's moving on. They're not using that as an excuse. They're not sitting there and dwelling on it. I think they're still pretty confident. I mean, I think once you lost the UCF game, your goal of being the Group of 5 team was pretty much gone. So I think at that point you just you want to win as many games as you can, but really you want to win the Mountain West. And that's kind of winning the Mountain Division is something that's kind of plastered all over the facility, and getting to that championship game is a big deal, and that's still attainable. I mean, they're 1-2, but they know they're a good team. They know the margin for error is very small, and they're very close to being 3-0, but they're not. But they get a fresh start for conference play on Saturday, and they're 0-0. I think they're looking forward to that.
Speaking of conference play, look, for example, this year the Aggies get that little break from having to face the 3 top teams in the other side of the division. Meanwhile, Boise State, after Utah State, has Nevada, they have Fresno State, they have just a litany of a gauntlet row of teams they got to face. How hard is it, do you feel like it will be for Boise State, take one game at a time, but yet look ahead and think, my goodness, it doesn't get any easier?
No, they don't have many winnable. There's not too many games on the schedule left where they can just say, oh, we can just show up and pretty much sleepwalk through this one and still win. I mean, maybe the New Mexico game at home, maybe the Wyoming game at home, but there's really not a lot of games left on the schedule where they're guaranteed wins. When you look at what the Mountain West is doing this year, they have to play at Fresno State, at San Diego State, at BYU, even though that's a non-conference game still. They've got to obviously go to Logan on Saturday. They still have Air Force coming into town. Nevada's coming to town next Saturday for what should be a huge game that will have implications on the league and who's going to host the championship game potentially. Some people said going into the season that this was maybe going into the season before you knew how good Fresno State or some of these teams were going to be. People were saying this is maybe the hardest schedule from game 1 to game 12 that Boise State's ever had. When you think about a non-conference that includes at UCF, at BYU, home versus Oklahoma State, and then a full league schedule, which includes having to play the Nevada, San Diego State, Fresno State side of things. I think people going in thought this was going to be an extremely tough schedule. It was an extremely raw deal, I guess, for Andy Avalos just for his first year to maybe have the hardest schedule in school history. But it's right up there, and now it's looking even tougher with what Fresno State appears to be. That's going to be a really tricky road game. The San Diego State one's certainly not going to be easy, and that's on Black Friday right after Thanksgiving at 9 in the morning. There's some tricky games on the schedule starting with Saturday. I think Saturday is a massive game for Boise State if they want to right this ship. I mean, they haven't been 1-3 since 1997, so this is not stuff that Boise State fans around here are usually talking about. And the whole Aaron Rodgers kind of relax speech has kind of come up this week where it's just they're 1-2, but there's they still feel confident. There's a lot of time left, but if they lose on Saturday, then all heck's going to break loose around here.
Again, we're talking to BJ Rains, beat writer for Idaho Press and a contributor to Blue Turf Sports. And BJ, Boise seems to be the home of former Utah State coaches. First it was Tim Duryea, now it's Frank Maile. Their assistant coaches on the staff. Stacy Collins is there as well. What are you? What's the sense from Frank and Stacy and just that coaching staff with having to face their old team?
Yeah, they've both talked the last 2 days. They made Frank Maile available to the media yesterday. We just got done talking to Stacy Collins here earlier today. Both are trying to say it's not about them. It's about, going there and getting a win, and now they're on the Boise State side of things. But, they obviously said they spent a lot of time there. Stacy Collins, 5 years. Frank Maile, 15 years spent in Logan during his various stops. And so, they obviously said it's, they've raised their families there and have a lot of ties there. And, Frank said when he estimates he'll look over, he'll recognize and know about 80% of the roster over there. And so, they obviously know that it's a big deal, and they're excited to go back, but they really were trying to keep it as business-like as they could and approach as they could. I mean, I think Stacy Collins said twice that he was, quote, damn happy to be at Boise State, and it was, all positive things towards Utah State. I don't think, they both said they loved their time there. They were appreciative of it. But I think the opportunity to come over to Boise State now and be on this side of things certainly, has energized them and excited them. And but Frank Miley in particular was trying to, didn't really want to go there and kind of just said, that it would maybe help them a little bit with knowing the tendencies and stuff of some of the players, but with it being a new staff and new offense, defense, that kind of thing, that they're just excited to go play the next opponent on the schedule, which happens to be Utah State. But I think it is going to be a big game with some personal emotion for both of them.
BJ, you always do a great job of watching the other opponents, the week before and such. What have you seen out of Utah State that impresses you?
What hasn't impressed me, really? I mean, their ability to finish in the second half. I mean, I know for Boise State, that's been a huge problem for them. Boise State's only scored 22 points in the second half in 3 games, and in both their losses, they just did much of anything. I think the scoring is 85-22, first half to second half, and when you look at it the other way, you can flip it, and Utah State, I think, has scored 85 points in the second half or something like that. So, I mean, Utah State is finishing, and Boise State is not. And so I've been impressed with Utah State in a couple of these close games, Washington State and Air Force being able to pull it out. And I just think the amount of playmakers they have at different spots, whether it be Tyler at the running back spot or Tompkins at receiver. I mean, they're just playmakers across on both sides of the ball. I mean, Justin Rice, 2 weeks in a row as the defensive conference player of the week. I mean, he's all over the field. And so I've just been impressed overall with their ability to mesh these transfers. I mean, you guys know better than me, but it's like 14, 15 transfers, I believe. And for them to mesh those guys together and make this work as quickly as possible is a big deal. And, Boise State's coaches were talking about just how wide their splits are. I mean, they were saying that there's receivers almost on the sidelines. They're so close to the sidelines you can't even tell when you're watching the film. They're almost out of bounds. Just the way that they're scheming teams to spread teams out with the splits and then get some one-on-one with the quarterback run game and things like that. I mean, they know what they're doing. They've used their personnel very well to find mismatches and to get guys in space. And I've been thoroughly impressed with them. I don't think many people have expected them to be 3-0 coming into this game. And, even after they were 2-0, they were almost 10-point underdogs at Air Force. And to win that game, I think, says a lot about where this team is at. Coach Anderson's come in and done a great job right away. So this by no means is going to be a walk in the park for Boise State. I mean, the spread's only like 10 points. And so that's, may seem like a lot. But for a Boise State-Utah State game, that's really not based on the history in the recent years. So I think that, this Utah State's going in the right direction, and I think it's going to be a heck of a game on Saturday.
Coach Blake Anderson has been very clear that this matchup will be the best defense this USU team has faced so far this year. Riley Wimpy, he's back. I mean, certainly he's got connections to Utah State with his 2 older brothers who played in Logan. Just give us a sense of how that defense is shaping up under Coach Avalos.
Well, I mean, they're a very physical, hard-hitting defense. They didn't have they only had 1 turnover in the last game, but going into last week, in the first 2 weeks, they had 8 takeaways on defense. They were like top 5 in the country in fumble recoveries and interceptions and overall takeaways. So they have an aggressive defense. The only real bugaboo has been stopping the run. And again, 75 yards came on 1 run where the guy broke free. So there's been a couple big plays that have kind of maybe altered the numbers a little bit, but that's been their main issue, is stopping the run. But they're creating turnovers. They're doing bending but not breaking. They're making good adjustments at halftime. All the numbers from the first half to the second half in all 3 games have come down. They're only allowing 22 points in the second half in 3 games. So they've done a pretty good job of limiting the other team and making adjustments. But they've got some playmakers, man. You mentioned Wimpy is a 5th-year, super senior. Kala Kaniho, a nickelback, is also a super senior, 5th-year guy. J.L. Skinner, if anybody watched that game against Oklahoma State, just had, one of those hits that everybody was tweeting and showing and talking about. Just rocked this guy and picked him up and threw him down. And so they've got some hard-hitting guys and some veteran guys. But they're dealing with a little bit of depth issues along the defensive line. They've got a couple guys out, so that's been a little bit of the issues in the running game. But I think they've always traditionally had a pretty good defense at Boise State, and I think they're close. And they're hoping that they've corrected some things, and this will be the week they put it all together.
BJ, I know people are not, or at least coaches and players are not trying to make a big deal about this game being on the mothership of TV, CBS. But how cool is it for the Mountain West Conference to have a game, regular season, morning time, 10 a.m., to be on CBS for the whole entire country to watch?
Oh, it's a big deal. It kind of limits the amount of fun I can have Friday night in Logan, but I'm sure everybody is worried about first and foremost. But no, I think it's a big deal for the league. I think that the television contract says 3 games have to be on Big CBS from the Mountain West Conference, and so they did the Air Force, was it Air Force Navy or Air Force Army a couple weeks ago, and then they've got this one, and then actually the Boise State at San Diego State game. CBS can't get the home games for Boise State. They're controlled by Fox, so They wanted Boise State, so they took two of their 4 league road games. So the one in the day after Thanksgiving, it's Black Friday, and actually it's 10 a.m. Mountain Time, but it's in California, so it'll actually start at 9 a.m. local time on Black Friday on CBS against San Diego State. So I think that it's going to be exciting for the league. I think they probably had hoped that Boise State was not 1-2 going into this game. And so I think that hurts it a little bit, but to have a chance to be the lead into the SEC game of the week and having, folks just flip on the channel maybe before the SEC game and see the second half of a Mountain West game, I think it's great exposure for Utah State, great exposure for the league and Boise State. And the whole TV contract, I noticed it in basketball. I thought basketball was way better in terms of getting more games on national TV, and whether it be Fox Sports 1 or CBS Sports Network or whatever. And so I know that, there was a lot of talk about that, but I think to this point, the TV contract, even though you lost ESPN, has actually worked out pretty well. They've gotten some pretty good time slots, some pretty good games, not a lot of 8:30 games, and so to this point, I think it's worked out pretty well. And yeah, to have a Mountain West game on, maybe it's a little early, 10 a.m., but that's right when game day's over, right when big noon kickoff show's over. People are going to be looking for games to watch right there at 10 a.m. And Boise State, Utah State is going to be probably one of the most watched games that both these teams will have all season, just being on regular CBS. So it's a big deal.
BJ, last question for me. I'm sure that there was a lot of interest and intrigue in Boise with watching what the Big 12 was going to do, trying to replace teams. And then when Boise State was not among the 4 in the initial round of replacement teams that the Big 12 did extend invitations to, what's the feeling there? Is there a sense that it's not over, there's still a chance, or does it feel like they had their opportunity and they missed it? They didn't get that chance to go to a Big 12 or another power conference?
Well, I think at first when they weren't among the first 4 in, I think that was disappointing for the fans, disappointing for everybody. I mean, it was a rough 24 hours because the news broke of which 4 teams they had picked, either on the day of or the day after of the UCF game. So you lose the UCF game like that, and then you find out you weren't picked for the Big 12. It was a rough 24 hours for Boise State fans. But then you had the Dennis Dodd story come out where they may not be done, and that Boise State and Memphis are 2 of the leading contenders if they have a second round of expansion. And that really got folks fired up again. And then you had the Texas Tech AD, and I think the Kansas State president, some others have come out and said, yeah, we definitely may not be done. We're just going to play this by ear and see what happens. And I think that's really energized Boise State fan base and even people at the university in terms of just sitting patient and waiting and controlling what they can control in terms of trying to sell tickets and trying to do things to keep putting themselves in a good position, keep getting donations, just keep quietly working. And I think they are holding on to that hope that, when Texas and Oklahoma leave, if they decide to replace those teams with 2 more, that they would be picked. I think when I heard that BYU was going for all sports and not just football, whenever that was a couple weeks ago, because I'd originally thought and heard that maybe BYU would just go for football. But when I heard that BYU is going for all sports, I immediately thought, oh, that's good news for Boise State, because that helps in terms of a travel partner, whether it be for women's soccer or volleyball or men's golf, whoever it is, to all of a sudden not have to have the Central Florida volleyball team come all the way out to BYU to play 1 game and go all the way back. I mean, it makes a little more sense to have another regional team where they could then play them on a Thursday and then come up to Boise to play on a Saturday or something. So I think Boise State's holding out hope. I think that it's good news that BYU's getting in, and I don't think the American makes any sense. I think the American is watered down. May have made sense, last year, but now when it's just a watered down version with none of these teams, I don't think it makes any sense for Boise State. Maybe Colorado State and Air Force do it, and it's not about the money, and maybe they jump ship because they think Boise State's leaving in a couple of years and that the conference is going to eventually go downhill. Maybe they see their lifeline and take it. I don't know. But for Boise State, it just doesn't make any sense to leave at this point. You have a chance, and what you think is a fairly good chance in 3 to 5 years to get into the Big 12. I think you just sit it out and wait your turn and try to help make the Mountain West the best you can until that point happens.